Yo, 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 yo. So you're wanting to get into some automatic watering or some automation in your grow room. Here's some of my tips and tricks on everything that I've done over the past 5 years, all of the changes and improvements I've made to my setup, and hopefully this can help you. Uh, let's get started. This is my flower room, and as you guys can see, I have a main line coming in. Anything that's inside this half-inch black tubing is considered my main line. So this is where the water comes from the reservoir, goes through a pressure washer filter, and then into a manifold, and then into valves to my 4 different pots. Right now I'm using 2 different drip caps, but I can have 4 plants in this setup with the manifold that I'm using. Right off the bat, filter. A lot of people don't run filters. The reason why I run filters is because your reservoir might have particles building up or sediment building up over time, and when your pump pulls that through, it can plug the small spaghetti lines, the 1/4-inch lines in your drip cap. So putting a pressure washer filter, so you can get at any automotive, just a normal pressure washer filter, a pre-filter, you can put that in line, and it's a good way that you can disconnect your tray, because I can just do a quick disconnect down here, and it's a good way to see your water flow and all that, and making sure that you're not getting plugged up. And then using a manifold. Some people have done single runs where they might plug the end and then just pierce holes down the run for each of your pots. If you do that, you're not always getting perfect pressure to every single pot. You would need to have a loop system, so you would have to have this main line come all the way back around, so it's just looping in on itself to continually increase the pressure, and then you can poke lines into it. And then another thing, you have to make sure every 1/4-inch spaghetti line coming off that is the same length to make sure that you're getting the same amount of water per plant. It can get confusing that way, and the way that I do it is a lot easier, so hopefully you guys can follow along. These manifolds are just, I think they're called Orbit, by the brand Orbit. They have so many different ones. This is a 4-way. They've got 6 ways. They got 8 ways. They got 10 ways. They got 2 ways. I've tried them all. They're really, really good. You can actually adjust the pressure on the top, and it has a filter in it. So you've got a filter here and a filter there, which is super, super handy. And then all of the white pipe here, you see, is RO piping. And why I use RO piping, we'll come out here, it's because you guys know me, it's cheaper, right? So these are the 3 different pipe or tubes that you'll see in irrigation or inside automatic. This is what I call 1/4-inch aquarium lines. So this is what you might see air hoses inside your reservoirs or anything like that. The white stuff here is what I call RO 1/4-inch lines. So this is what you would see in like RO potable water inside houses, maybe what you would see up to your fridge, something like that. And then the black stuff is usually irrigation, outdoor irrigation lines, or just 1/4-inch spaghetti. This is what you see a lot. And then you also have a little bit smaller, it's supposed to be a 1/4-inch as well, but it's the flex line, which is super, super nice, so you can flex them around. So those are your 3. I like the RO stuff the best, personally, because it is cheaper, and it seems to work really well. And then you can get down to your fittings, too. I use, again, RO fittings, which are these pressure ones. They're kind of like a shark bite almost. You take off this blue, you push the pipe in, and it locks in there. But there is also the irrigation ones where more of the barb style, where they press in, kind of like you'd get the Orbit kit here, whatever. You'd have all these different fittings, right? You'd have your ends, your sprinkler nozzles, and all these different nozzles that you could use in your pots as well. But again, so you have your RO fittings kind of go on the outside of the pipe, easy to disconnect, change up, and then you have your irrigation ones that go on the inside of the pipe. So again, I like the RO. They're a little bit cheaper. They work really, really well. Another super important thing is if you have a super strong pump, like maybe 1,000 gallons per hour, or maybe even 500, whatever, you might need to use a mainline pressure reducer. So this will lower the pressure to 30 psi. So say if you have like 90 psi coming in or something like that, or something ridiculous coming in, you want to lower it because it can blow all your nozzle heads and stuff, right, which you don't want. So this is an inline mainline pressure reducer, or you can use inline spaghetti 1/4-inch pressure reducer. So now you're putting these on each of your nozzles and each of your drippers. So this allows you to lower the pressure at maybe a certain zone or a certain point. I don't use these too often, but they are super, super handy. Another thing, now that I'm on this topic right here, another thing that's super, super important, let's go over to the res, is this inline a check valve or anti-siphon valve or a back water valve. I think there's different terms for these right here, but this is just a 1/2 inch anti-siphon. So what this does is every single time your pump runs and runs water to your system, as soon as it shuts off, there is a chance that this water just keeps going because your nozzles, your drip caps, or whatever you're using in your flower room is pulling a siphon through. So it's actually pulling the water through your pump and it'll drain your whole reservoir. So you really have to watch. Using an anti-siphon valve like this, super, super, super important. Some people put a little hole on the bottom of their mainline pipe and it'll drip water down here after the pump turns off. But super, super important. Again, that's an anti-siphon valve. So you can do anti-siphon valve and then you can do the pressure reducer if you need it. I'm just using a smaller, I think this is an 800 gallon per hour pump. And putting a valve on here is super, super handy too, because you can also change your pressure a little bit by using a little bit, adding a little bit more head pressure to the pump. It's not always recommended, but you can definitely do that just a little bit. And it's also nice to be able to isolate your system. So I have a union here with this, turn everything off, be able to maintain it and stuff, right? So let's go back over to the fittings. So I mentioned the different drip caps and stuff. What I use are cube caps, and they have different, they've got 3 different ones. So they have their 10-inch little round ones. This is nice to go inside a fabric pot or just on top of plastic pots. 5 gallon, probably up to 7 gallon with these ones. They have the little 6-inch square ones, which are super nice to even put inside of any size pot. Allows you to have a little bit of flood zone because you can flood on top of this when you're pouring, or your automation can go in here, or you can just drip it right on top, kind of like what I do with the Twitch Grows setup, right? They work really, really nice. And then they also have their big 12-inch one, which can you can put stakes through the side and stuff, do some low stress training and stuff. Super, super handy. But again, there's so many different brands of these. These are just the ones I use. There's also little drip stakes you can use. I used to use these back in the day. You would stick this in your soil, and then it will allow the water to go down to the root zone and drip a little bit on top. You would have to use multiple per pot of these to make it effective, or as effective as these drip caps, in my opinion. But again, that's the option. For pHing, some people like to pH their reservoir. I don't have to do any pHing on my reservoir just because it comes from the fish tank, like you guys have seen in other videos. But if you are pHing, I just use general hydroponics as pH up, pH down. Works really, really well. If you're not watering very often and you're letting this reservoir sit, like if you're letting it sit for 4 or 5 days at a time, an extended period of time, you might want to put an air stone in it, like I showed here. So just an aquarium air stone with like an air pump or something. So this is just your, sorry, the lighting's bad here, top fin aquarium air pump, and this just adds aeration to the water and keeps it moving, right? So if your water's moving, it's not stagnant, which is a good thing, right? So I know there's just so much information going at you at once, but there's so many different reservoir kits online that you can buy, and they're super, super expensive. But if you've got a smaller setup like mine, a smaller grow where you might only do 4 plants at a time, these little buckets that you can get from Costco, Canadian Tire, Home Depot, this is a 25-gallon tote. When you start getting to the bigger ones, like the ones that are about that size over there, you start to have issues with them bowing out. But the smaller ones this size have no issues, and you can double stack them. So if you get the bigger one, you can double stack the bottom, allow it add a little bit more strength so they don't bow out. But that's all I used here. Super, super handy with those. Don't spend an arm and a leg on a reservoir. It doesn't make sense. Again, just a cheaper pump in there. I always have the vertical leg up and then out to the grow room. I try not to make this like a flexible line out. I want it to go up and then straight out. There is a flex line here just because it allows me to move this reservoir just a little bit on that wall, so it's not super solid. But as soon as you get into the flower room, I've made it solid, because you don't want this shit banging all over the place or anything like that, right? So once I get into the flower room, like I showed you, I've just got those drip caps nice and easy. I've just got valves on the ones that I'm not using to close them off, because obviously we're not using them. And then I do have a little pipe in there that drains out to my sump pit, because the last thing you want is an automatic watering setup go wrong, and then your whole thing just gets filled with water and you're not here in time and it overflows. So it's nice to have a drain. I don't really have runoff with the style grow I do, but you might have lots of runoff where it needs to go somewhere. You might be in an ebb and flow. There's so many different watering setups, but this is just how I choose to do it. And again, just to recap, pressure washer filter going into the 1/2-inch irrigation, going up to the Orbit 4 manifold, and I always suggest manifolds. And then all of these runs off are the exact same length, always the exact same length, so that everything's the same, right? That's the last thing we want, is this one getting twice as much water as that one, right? Let me go show you guys an ebb and flow system here. Let's just jump over there. So over here in our virtual grow, our remotely controlled grow via the Twitch chat, this is called an ebb and flow, or a flood table. What it is there's a reservoir on the bottom. So underneath here, you hold the water, holds about 25 gallons under there. Well, probably 20 gallons under there. You have a pump that's hooked up to this one right here. So we have, the fill right here. We have the drain right here. So this only allows it to flood up to here, and then it starts the overflow, right? So this will, how you can have this set up is you can set it on a schedule. Once every day at 1 p.m. it floods it. The water will absorb into the pot and it'll soak up, feed the roots. Next day it keeps doing the same thing. I have top watering on this one as well, because like I said, it is the remotely grown plant, so they can control it how they like. But an ebb and flow is super nice for mothers, for veg, because you just fill it, you pH it, or you maybe don't, whatever method you're using, and then you just let it go. You can put so many pots in here, and then this goes, it just keeps going, right? Fills it up, drains it out, fills it up, drains it out. That's why it's flooding it, draining, flooding it, draining, and it's bottom watering all the way. So that's a super nice system too. I used to use this in my veg with my mothers. It allowed you to just forget about it and allowed them just to go for like weeks on end without having to do anything. Super handy. But looking around at all my stuff that I have prepared here, I think I went over everything. Make sure you're using a pump that's not too terrible. Like I mentioned earlier, you don't need something that's like 1,000 gallons per hour, but you don't want something that's only 200 gallons per hour. I know it sounds like a lot, but it is super small, and it's not going to give you the pressure, the head pressure that you need to get to every single one of your plants. So I would probably stick with a minimum of probably like 600 gallons per hour. Try and get up to that 100 gallons per hour pump, and then you can use pressure reducers if you need it, like I showed you. But a lot of times you might not need it. Like in this, there's no pressure reducers in this. They're straight off the pump. In my flower room, I only have the anti-siphon, which reduces the pressure a little bit, but not too much. Again, anti-siphon, super important so that you're not sucking out all of your water. Like I said, if this had a siphon going here, as soon as the pump turns off, this water can keep trickling and pulling all the water out of the bottom of this reservoir and feed this plant 20 gallons in an hour, which is not what we want. So make sure that your reservoir is either lower so you can't have that siphon, or you've got the anti-siphons or the holes, right? Well, I think I went over everything. I hope I went over everything. If you guys have any questions, throw it in the comments. I've done so many different setups with these auto watering that I don't want to consider myself a professional or an expert at it, but the DIY stuff, I feel like I'm pretty good at it. And going back here, for those who might ask, in the reservoir, what are all these? These are just the pulse sensors, so the EC, the pH sensors that I use to save all the data, right? So I hope this went over everything. If you guys have any questions, leave them below. I'll try and add as much as I can add to the description for what I use. But yeah, guys, peace, love, and cheers. For those who've stuck around to the end, just want to add, make sure you install your anti-siphon above your reservoir, because after the pump stops, it drips water to release that pressure. So if you had it over here, to drip water all over the floor. So make sure you install this above your reservoir or tray. And another thing that I didn't mention in the main video, but for those who are sticking around, I just use cheap TP-Link indoor smart plugs. They seem to be really reliable for my schedules.